Testing.
Today is Monday, April 24th, 2023. We are at the Green Ladle, and we will call this meeting to order at 5:36 p.m. and starting with the Pledge of Allegiance. We will start with school committee member introductions, and we'll begin with the city council rep.
Linda Scott, Lewiston City Council representative on the school committee.
Paul Popelant, Ward 7 representative.
Megan Hurd, Ward 6.
Ashley Medina, Ward 5.
Tanya Whitlow, Ward 4.
Elizabeth Eames, Ward 3.
Janet Bowden, Ward 2.
Bruce Damon, Ward 1.
Megan Parks at large.
Jake Langley, Superintendent.
Karen Paquette, Assistant Superintendent. Hannah Dewale, Senior Representative.
Thank you. Agenda item number 3 is to receive and potentially vote on the nomination for the principal position at Montello Elementary School.
So we'll invite Tiffany up to the podium. Some of you were involved in the interview process and it followed through with an additional meeting with me. Tiffany has been an interim at Montello this year, also worked there prior for multiple years. Has been great to work with. As a leader of the school, I have a lot of confidence in her ability to problem solve day to day, trust her decision making, but also when she has kind of heavy hitters come up and she's not sure what to do, she seems to handle those situations the right way. She creates time and space, she asks questions, and she carries forward in the best interest of our kids. So I couldn't say enough positive things about her. I don't know, Ken, if you want to add anything or just like to nominate Tiffany for principal at Montello.
Would you like to say anything now or after we vote, or neither?
Say after this.
Okay. Just in case.
Just in case.
Member Bowden.
Thank you. So I was part of the interview process, and I just have to say that Tiffany wowed me with how articulate she was in her answers, the real world knowledge that she brought to the situation because she's lived it, she's been there. She has relationships in that school, and it just showed like she was a clear winner in that process. And I would love to put forth the motion to approve Tiffany as the new principal at Montello.
Thank you. Member Bobola.
Thank you. Thank you. Before I second, I was also privileged to sit in on the interview and the accolades that our candidate received from peers and staff was really neat to hear. And I'm also, it's always been a bugaboo with mine, the loyalty. We don't want somebody that's going to use the position as a stepping stone. Her time in is recognized and appreciated. So I second the motion.
Thank you. Member Hurd.
Thank you. So I've had the privilege of talking to a couple of staff members over at Montello out of school, as we have children who are friends and they are staff of yours, and they have nothing but great things to say about you, which is great because it was in one of those situations where it's not in a professional situation. It was just their genuine thoughts about you as a leader and a team member in their school. So I am fully prepared to back you for nomination. Thank you.
Any further discussion? All in favor? It's unanimous. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
I do appreciate the kind words. Those mean a lot. I am eager to continue to serve at Montello. I'm really passionate about the work I do and the people we're serving. It's a pretty incredible community. So again, we'll always welcome you in anytime you want to see the awesome work that our staff and students and families are doing. But I really appreciate the opportunity to continue at this school that I have known and loved for a very long time. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Agenda item number 4 is to receive and potentially vote on the nomination for Assistant Director at LRTC.
Just to start this one, I'll invite up Director Callahan, who's brought forward a nomination. I'll let you go first, so I don't steal any thunder, and I may follow.
Thank you very much. I'm pleased to be here tonight to bring forth a nomination for the position of Assistant Director at LRTC. Rob Schmidt has been our Student Services Coordinator at LRTC since, I think, 2015, Rob. And prior to that, served as a JMG job specialist since 2009. For those of you know Rob, he is incredibly student focused. He is someone who's got really strong connections to our community, our local colleges and employers, someone who is well known to those good partners in the community. And I think he's someone that cares deeply about LRTC's mission. So again, over the course of his work in terms of developing our co-op program, doing all of our recruitment, I'm always pleased to share the fact that our recruitment numbers are very high, and enrollment is at a peak. And a lot of that has to do with Rob's good work. He has got very strong connections to all our regional partners in their directors of guidance and principals and things of that nature. And again, someone that just brings a lot of student focus to our work. And so I'm pleased to be here tonight to bring his nomination before you.
Yeah, I don't have a lot to add. I've known Rob for all those years as well, because I taught across the hall for a while, and then I was worked with him in his different capacities as he's come up through. Rob mentioned the co-op piece. It was an important piece for me years ago, and it remains an important piece. But he's someone that can sit in the room and talk to us about those conversations about student placements and work experiences and work shadows, and he helps coordinate, facilitate all those. And not known to everyone, he's, I think, still drives a minibus over to Auburn almost daily to pick up kids because there's a transportation snag there. But he's one of those people. If that's what has to happen to make it happen, he's going to get in a bus and drive over there and get them. So just want to remind the committee that this is a one-year ESER position, and this is connected to the work we're doing here in an expanded capacity also over in Auburn, as the technical center is our regional school. So that's a big piece of that work. So that's a conversation that's ongoing around superintendent or with superintendents around the table about as being a region, and those programming being available to all the schools in the region, and how we're going to make sure it's sustainable for all of our kids.
Member Bowden?
So can I just have to ask, since you just said that, so this position would only be for 1 year?
So it's part of that ESER grant pot that we've talked about, that there's some funding for that 1 more year, and it's specific to the technical center. It's a kind of their disbursement of the ESER funds. This is how Director Callahan's chosen to use that.
And I'm comfortable with that, but what happens to Rob after that year?
So,
Rob will always be Rob.
And my anticipation in the conversation we've started with our region is that this will be brought into that regional budget that we've talked about, and the fact that there will be a regional assessment that we're working towards, and our cooperative agreement will pick up expenses like the ones associated with administration.
And some of these costs do get picked up by subsidy. So once programs are running,
Yeah.
like our educators, there's associated costs that are provided for in subsidy.
Any further questions, comments? Member Whitlow?
So this position was already a position that we funded previously, right?
It was, so this has been funded with ESER funds as a second person, a second assistant director to help with the expansion efforts. So we recently had Peter Gagnon resign, and so this would be filling that position that was already there. Yeah.
Member Whitlow?
I'd be happy to make a motion to approve. Oh gosh, Rob Schmidt, I almost called you Peter, Rob Schmidt as the Assistant Director of LRTC.
I will second that.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor? It's unanimous. Congratulations. Thank you.
If Rob could come up and give a long speech and answer a few questions, we'd appreciate it. But Rob, please come on up and at least introduce yourself a little bit. While Rob's making his way, I spoke to Director Callahan, and we're going to have some students invited for our meeting next week, connected to Skills USA, and recognize them. I didn't want to do it right after the break. We didn't want too many people to forget. So I'm going to have them come next week.
Well, good evening, everyone. I really appreciate this nomination and you accepting me. It really means a lot. I've been in education since 2000. Prior to that, I was in the restaurant industry as a manager and a business owner for a few years. I've been coaching basketball for a lot of years at the varsity level. But one of my most favorite parts of my professional career has been working in Lewiston. It's a fantastic school system, and LRTC is an awesome place to be. My heart is in it, and I'll give you my best for our students and for all of you. So I thank you very much.
Thank you. Agenda item number 5 is the consent agenda. Are there any members who have anything they would like set aside from the member Scott?
Not to set aside, but just to point out that I was not in attendance for the 322 and 329 meetings, so I'm not sure. Just to point out that those, I really don't feel I can approve those particular minutes for those 2 meetings, but I'm good with the rest of the consent agenda.
Are we all set to approve those and make adjustments?
Just for clarification, are you noted as present for those?
I was
So-
absent for those.
Okay,
2
so there's
meetings.
no edit.
There's no edit. I just don't think that I should vote on those minutes where I wasn't here on those particular
Okay, gotcha.
meetings.
I see
So,
what you're saying. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Seeing nothing else, the consent agenda is adopted. Move on to public input. Members of the public may address the school committee for up to 3 minutes on non-agenda items now and on agenda items later. Comments that pertain to staff, personnel matters, or a student issue should be directed to the superintendent or the appropriate staff member of Lewiston Public Schools. Public comments shall be directed to the school committee and be brief, not repetitive, and related to the matter at hand. Before starting, please state your name, address, and affiliation to Lewiston Public Schools. Are there any members of the public that would like to speak? Seeing none, we will move along. The next item is to receive an update on grant submissions.
So some of these might seem repetitive because we've talked about them in the past, but just want to make sure we're keeping you up to date with our ongoing efforts around grants. So I'll speak to the first one, but there's others that may speak to other pieces here. The Sewell Foundation piece is one I've mentioned to you before. That's something that I think could be a big difference in our community, but this is when I had shared that the group decided to take an approach around convening and signing an MOU with Lewiston Public Schools, which in effect means that the agreements are by way of the foundation, but with us. So we're aware of the work they're trying to do so that we can also help be coordinated about that effort. We have a lot of community nonprofits doing good work, both directly here in Lewiston and in the periphery. So if we can coordinate that effort by communicating with each other, with student permissions and parent permissions, things of that nature, we can better resource the resources that we do have. And the Sewell Foundation has been a great partner with that. So we're looking forward to that, and a lot of developments, a lot of $10,000 or so grants that are helping support this effort to get all of these groups working together directly with and for Lewiston Public School students. So we're really excited about that one. Mental health piece, Karen, chime in on that one.
So this grant is called Expanding Access to Supportive Environments in Maine Schools. And it's actually a U.S. Department of Education grant that helps to address mental health needs and provide supports to students, families, and schools by using funds that were made available in the 2022 Appropriations Act and the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act. So this money or these funds and this grant was awarded to the Maine DOE from the US DOE, and they identified 10 school districts in the state of Maine to participate in this work. This grant also involves some local universities as well as DHHS and some other folks in the state. And really the goals of the grant are to increase recruitment and retention of school-based mental health service providers to promote respecialization and professional retraining of existing mental health service providers to qualify them for work in the SAUs or in the districts with a demonstrated need. So for example, you may remember we've had some conversations about folks and their certification and not being certified in the areas that we needed them to be certified in. And so this grant is one way to help with that work. And then the last goal is to increase the diversity, cultural, and linguistic competency of school-based mental health service providers. So there are those three goals for the whole grant. We as a district can set some goals ourselves. We're still getting the details of this grant and what it means, but I'm pretty excited about being part of this work and being able to maybe offer some of our existing staff the opportunity to get those credentials that they need with funds that are being offered through this, as well as provide our district staff opportunities to participate in some state level professional development around mental health.
Thank you. So I guess I'm wondering, with this grant, it sounds like we're going to be hiring or taking in-house and kind of changing positions. Is this something that we're going to be able to fund once the grant runs out? How does the financial piece of this work? Because we're in a really tight budget. So
That's a great question.
Yeah.
So this is a 5-year grant. And actually the financial, I don't have the amount with me right now, but the financial contribution of the grant is not a lot for us as a district, but the money at the state level is a bigger pot of money, which helps go towards the training and those sorts of things. So if the sustainability plan after 5 years would need to be something that we would submit and be approved, and that would be something that we would all need all of you to weigh in on. What I see as a financial piece for sustainability is really about filling those positions and being able to pay those people ongoing. Many of the positions that we would like to fill are already in our budget and are open because we're not able to find, or we're contracting with another agency to provide those services. So I can get you more information about the budget and all of those things once I have it, and you'll have some input on that to weigh in on whether we're able to support that.
Member Scott?
Thank you. I appreciate that, because not only information about the budget impact, but also your description of this whole, because I try to write things down, and that was a very big description. And I think it's important that I'd like to see that in writing so I can keep it in my brain a little better. Thank you.
I'm happy to send that to you.
This doesn't require a vote or anything, does it? Any of these? Okay.
So the next one is also one that I can share some information about. This grant or opportunity was announced not that long ago, and it's about some funds being available for the MLTI. If you remember MLTI from way back with the one-to-one, but this grant is really around teaching with technology. So not just putting computers in students' hands, but providing additional things such as 3D printers, laser cutters, video production equipment, specialized cameras, drones, robotics, coding kits, digital microscopes, document cameras, so on and so forth. So the things that we may not have access to because funds are tight, or we needed computers instead. This is a grant that we have not been awarded. This is a grant that we've expressed interest in, but we wanted to just let you know that it's out there, and it's something that we as a district have said we're interested. We want more information, and we'd like to be considered. And the last one that's on my list, I guess, is it's stated as a parent engagement grant. And this was, again, through the state of Maine. They partnered with a company that it's called Ready for K. And it's actually an online platform that provides tips and updates and supports to families, caregivers around education, around social emotional learning, around all things that we focus on. We expressed interest in this and being part of this, and we actually are on the waiting list. So we haven't received any funds. We will be hopefully will be the next one on the list to find out more about it. But I just wanted to give you a heads up. It is something that is out there in the state. And if something was to come out, we wanted you to know that we had expressed interest, and hopefully we'll be part of the next wave to participate.
Last one I'll touch on, but Bill's here too if we want more information, but we've talked about that grant application for the energy savings component. And so we've done that work, and that grant has now been submitted. And so the hope is, if you recall a while back, the energy savings project that we asked a lot of questions about, wanted to know more about. This is a different approach to the same kind of work where there's a grant that pays for the effort instead of Lewiston Public Schools taking on a mortgage for that savings return. So I think a lot of good work went into that, but just want to let you know that we've submitted it. You've heard about it prior, but just giving you an update that it's been sent in. Bill, do you want to add anything? Or Megan?
Is there any projects that JCI is doing that we've budgeted for this current budget season?
No.
Okay, we're waiting on the grant to see if
Yep.
we get that.
And the only thing I was gonna add is we should know something by June. And if we were awarded the grant in June, then work would probably commence in the fall.
And can you just give us like a quick rundown of what the grant covers? Like, are we looking at like,
So it's a lighting, controls, and HVAC is kind of the 50,000 foot view of it. But it was essentially based on the performance contract that was presented when JCI came to us. So, and that the subcommittee looked at.
so for lighting, you don't technically need a performance contract for lighting unless you're doing like outside stuff, correct? So I just want to make sure we're not giving JCI all of our money to have for them to screw in light bulbs and change those types of things. Like for us to change over those things, we can do that on our own. That's not something that we need a performance contract for technically, correct?
We could, I think some of it would be fixtures and like where you'd have to have an electrician do that stuff. But everything with the contract comes with that performance piece to it. So any work that they're going to be doing, they're also going to be providing us yearly updates on what the savings were with whatever projects we move forward with.
And you said like yearly. So how long is a performance contract for?
So the one that was presented to us was going to be a 20-year contract, and that was not necessarily where we wanted to be because we were going to be financing over 20 years. So we could get that. We could ask for that information for 20 years based on what we went after for the grant, because it's very similar to that scope. But it would be, at least 10 years.
And is there anything, and I don't know how this works, and maybe like you or Bruce can answer this better, but if we are unhappy or not on the same page as JCI, like, is there an opportunity to like cut ties with them? Like, are we locked into this for the full, let's just say 15 years? I'm sure it's going to depend on like how much money you get awarded is what is going to determine the length of the contract. Cause then that will determine on what we're going to do for projects and stuff like that.
So while we use the performance contract to write the grant, and that was kind of like the scope of work, the mechanism works a little bit different because there's not these guaranteed savings necessarily. It's that we get a report that says what the savings are. Kind of good thing about this is the performance contract was presented to us first with what the 20 years savings were going to be annual. But instead, and then what happened is the grant came out. And so now it was like, well, rather than finance all of that, you'd recognize those savings pretty quickly. So answers things.
I just want to add to it. I think the biggest difference between the route we've taken now versus what we were looking at before was that the performance contract was more about, you're telling us we're going to save this much, and I want a contract guaranteeing it for the work that you do. Now we've partnered with JCI. They've helped us write a grant that they're very familiar with from other avenues of their network. And the grant should pay for these changes. And we did our best to shrink the obligation so that we're not. One example that came up prior was, you can rate this light bulb for 20 years, but it's not going to last 20 years. And so when you have to replace it after 15, then what? And so I think this approach and the good work Bill's done is going after the funds to help pay for that project. So it's not just on us to finance something. So this avoids that whole finance this big project conversation altogether. I think there's a minimal cost because of the project to get it going, and then that's it.
Thank you. So, and I think, Bill, you've done a great job. Obviously, the facilities team has done a great job. My only concern ultimately is with JCI on their own. When they came and presented to us, what they were presenting to us, I didn't think was legit. What they were trying to quote unquote sell us. I feel like they were more trying to come in as sales guys and not actually trying to help us as a district. I don't like that they have a breakup fee. If we decide not to do work with them, they're going to charge us, an infinite amount of numbers. So we were kind of forced to keep going with them. And it has nothing to do with you. It has nothing to do with you. It has nothing to do with facilities. I'm just saying, in general, I'm just not super impressed by what they have come to the table with, so far, as in just what they presented.
I guess somehow to try to separate the two, because the first project they had pitched, I would agree, was very sales feel, the rates are really low, do it now kind of thing. And we did not proceed with that project, but we did take the study of what they had done with how many fixtures do you have, how many square feet do you have that you could save money if you did this, this, and this. So that piece is still there. This is really a second effort. And hopefully we get the grant. That would be ideal. We can come back and talk about how it did not cost us here specifically locally, certain amount of dollars. But I would agree that I think the best work that happened in that whole set of project conversations with the facilities team was the people at the table that were able to say, is that really a savings, between Bruce's expertise around mechanical things and what Greg was able to bring the conversation around purchasing and lifespan of things. It's been very helpful. And I think if we get this grant, it'll save us millions of dollars.
And I think ultimately, and correct me if I'm wrong, facility committee members that were there, when you looked at the scope of the project, things were worthy to do. It was just doing it and financing it over 20 years was a really difficult thing to wrap our heads around, knowing that, I'm probably not going to be in this position. Hopefully I'm on this planet in 20 years, but I'm not going to be in this position in 20 years probably. And, somebody to be looking at the books and being like, wait, what is this? What is this note that we're paying off here? And that was really something that we found difficult with the first performance contract that was put in front of us, was the terms. So I think I'm correct in saying that.
Member Damon?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And now, we've seen, I think, now 3 different approaches to doing some of this work. 3 different vendors, 3 different approaches. And the one that Bill has worked with and the JCI really helped us write was the first one that was a true grant. We're talking about, this could immediately reduce the debt service to the district by potentially millions of dollars. And they were right up front about it, and they were spot on with how they approached it. And I feel, having worked with Bill on it and looked at it, I feel really positive that we stand, I would say, a far better than average chance of getting this awarded, wouldn't you, Bill?
I'm a little superstitious, so I don't necessarily want to say, but when we submitted it on Wednesday, JCI felt very confident in kind of, even talking with their corporate folks of this application being very strong. So.
We are competing for federal dollars, but it's, it's something that just, because we kind of hesitated till we felt more comfortable. This opportunity actually came about because we didn't jump at it. So I think that, sometimes moving too quickly, it's not necessarily the best approach, but I think our measured approach to this actually is going to serve the district very well. And it's like Bill said, 20 years from now, chances of any of us, chances of my being around at that point is very, very remote. So, no, I think that this is the right approach to this, and it should save the district significant dollars if we get the grant. So if we do, we're going to give Bill a shining star for the week. So it's just my job.
Anything further on this? All right. Agenda item number 8 is to receive the New England Association of Schools and Colleges accreditation report on Lewiston High School.
All right, so Principal Radke is going to make his way up, but I want to just give you a precursor that Lewiston High School is an accredited school through the NEASNC. That's the NEASC we call it. So if you hear us say NEASC a lot, but they come in and they look at self-studies. John will touch on some of this, but John, I have your slideshow I can put up. Yeah, I'll take care of that. Sorry. And so just to understand that they've shifted from what used to be a benchmarking process every 10 years. So they go decade and then they do a 5-year visit to make sure you were doing what you said, and then a decennial visit to accredit you or not accredit you based on what's happened. They have since flipped their process, and they go with you doing a self-study first, and they kind of ask you, what are the things that you want to get better with, and what are the things that need to happen, and what are the things that have weakened or strengthened your organization. And then it's a flowing conversation of improvement. So what used to be kind of benchmarks, 5-year, 10-year, have gone to more of the quality improvement approach. And so it's a constant cycle of feedback. So I think it's better this way than having these benchmarks that feel heavy. It's a big lift though. So I want to commend the staff who've been working on this since before the pandemic, all the way back when I was in that building full time. And John and his team saw it through as things unfolded, and now we have reporting, and part of the process is the reporting get shared publicly and also with you, and Principal Radke is going to share more information.
Can you push your mic?
There we go.
Oh, let me get that for you.
As Jake did say, it's been a long process, and we've got a timeline, and it's enlightening to see how it's played out over the past 5 years. But really, the people who deserve the majority of the credit for this are the committee at the school, who managed to maintain some continuity over some rather hectic changes. So this is the final report. Just so you know, this in the process, this final report goes on to the Commission on Accreditation, probably in June, where they sort of chew on it and say something about it. Rob Callahan is our representative to that, the New England, the main representative, as well as Gretchen McNulty, who's I used to work with in Falmouth. So I know 2 of the people who are going to be decision makers on that. I don't foresee major difficulties at all. So go ahead. So these are the committee members who really have done all the work to keep this process going. Both the steering committee and standards chairs, standards. I do have a slide in here that sort of explains the nomenclature a little bit for you, but these are the 5 fundamental elements that good, in the opinion of NEASC, good schools should have. And so each person took charge of one of those and chaired a committee to look at it as far as how Lewiston High School stacked up. And then the steering committee, just the whole process, making sure that we had hotel rooms for the folks when they came to visit us in November, et cetera. Next slide. Timeline. So this is started in 2019, and the initial meeting with NEASC, they come by 2019 to 2020. You get into the meat of the co-chairs and the steering committee get appointed, and they begin the work, bring members under the committees. Staff gets briefed, committee meetings start, and then, of course, as we all know, the next thing that happened in 2020 was, did it pop up? the staff votes on the NEAS standards, meaning what we think, and then chaos hits on the 13th. And so not just for us, but for everybody, including NEAS, and things, this very orderly process became put on hold while we tried to figure out. And incidentally, my previous school was going through reaccreditation at exactly the same timeline. So everything stopped, and we tried to figure out how to do it once we got into the ecosphere of dealing with a pandemic. So in 2020, 2021, virtual conference visit. So obviously we weren't going to be running people up and down the East Coast. So these were done virtually. And then data review in 21, 22, all through last year before I got here. Visits, steering committee meetings, review the ratings, begin the vision of the graduate work in 2022 to the present is sort of ongoing as well. And they came and visited us right after in November, but before that, the faculty took a look at the information that we had presented to them and voted their opinion on it and affirmed that this was the report we were giving to our visiting committee. And then they came in November, did a site visit around the building, talked to panels of teachers, students, community members. I believe some of you were invited to chat with them around that. And then they've been drafting this report, and it got to our desk in late March or middle March. So big changes since we started the process, right? So there 44.3% of the teachers are new to the building. So we're finishing with almost 50% turnover, and 3 principals and 3 assistant principals during that same time period. So when I say that the credit goes to the people who chaired the committees and kept the process going, I really mean that. They provided the continuity over time. And of course, a massive expansion of space, which addressed one of the key issues from years before, which was not enough space. So things changed a lot during the 5 years of this process. So foundational elements. These are the New England Association of Schools and Colleges ideals, right? Standards, think standards equal foundational elements. You know, they keep changing the words, and they do one more vocabulary shift, but hopefully I've translated it for you. So within each of these foundational elements, and this is in your report, if you count them up, there are 34 sub-elements, right? So in order to get a perfect score, you got to be perfect on all of those. And of course, when we rate it ourselves, I mean, there's always something to work on. So, you know, the whole idea of the value in these visits is that they help you focus and concentrate. So based on both the self-rating, visitor rating, and when we get to the shortfalls, those turn into recommendations, which are written up at the end of the report, and we'll go over those briefly. So that was a precursor to don't panic when you see this. You know, these are extremely specific. So it says learning culture 1A. So it's just that sub element. It's not all of learning culture that's a challenge, but it's 1A. So if you get out your report and you want to look at it, you can see that that's the school community provides a safe, respectful, and inclusive culture that ensures equity and honors diversity and thought. And then it goes, oh no, that's 1. That's 1A is the school community provides a safe environment. So way back during the collaborative conference, we said we did it. They said we did it. COVID happens, lots of stuff goes on. And then they said, well, we said we're not meeting this anymore. And we'll get into the reasons. And they agreed with that. And you'll see that the only place we don't line up in the final decennial visitors ratings are 3-1A. But there's a note that says we say we've gotten there with our professional practices. And they, you know, since it really this year. So 3-1A, if I recall, is the school engages all stakeholders in development and 1A. The school has a current school improvement growth plan. We're in the process, and we'll talk about that when we get to that specific recommendation. We do have a school So all in all, yeah, go ahead. 7 recommendations of things to do. And depending on how you count them, 12 or 15 commendations. So what that says is we're doing more right than we are wrong. And I think we always tend to focus on the negative, but we really, I also want to say there's a lot of really good things happening at Lewiston High School. All right. So let's take a look then at those 7 recommendations that they come up with for us. First one is complete the vision of the graduate. This is sort of that overarching, what do we want the person who graduates from Lewiston High School to know and be able to do, and how should we feel they should function in the world? That's in process, and it's due to be completed by the fall of 2023. That'll be handy because it will help it helps us make decisions to saying, is this going to help us get there, or is this a waste of time or not focused enough? Great management tool to have. Recommendation 2, ensure sufficient staffing to meet student needs, in particular the school counselor caseloads. So during this year, we have completed an internal staffing audit. We did that prior to the budget season, so that when the budget came, we made sure that we were sufficiently staffed, but not overstaffed. And there was some rebalancing that occurred. Currently, the budget, currently as budgeted, meets the goal for all general education classes, that we will be sufficiently staffed, and the school counselor caseloads. One of the things that's true is we've been advertising for school counselors, and the positions have gone unfilled. So although we are getting some interest, I think we may have just hired, maybe in the closing in on hiring one before the year's out. Recommendation 3, complete identified security measures. So what I would say is technical places are nearly complete, and training for staff is ongoing. If you've come to the high school, the camera system's working now, the entryway is working now, the badges are all working, panic buttons, lockdown buttons, all that sort of stuff. There are some additional technical pieces, like, being able to know when one of the 42 doors in the building is open to the outside without actually having to get a visual on it. But beyond, we assume that we close them and lock them in the morning, and most students come in and out one spot. We do have cameras on them all, so we know if something happened, and we can chase things down from there. The key piece now is training for staff, is ongoing. There's always the human, and the most important element in any security system is the human element. You can have all the cameras and locks in the world, but if people prop doors or don't use them, then they're not worth very much. So, continuing education to staff and in the building, what we have, what we need them to do and not do. If you take your gym class outside, make sure the door's locked behind you. Just simple stuff like that. But that's going to be ongoing forever. I mean, no matter what else we put in place. Grading system, refined grading system information for all stakeholders. To start with, that 44% of the staff, we had to educate them how our grading worked this year. We spent some staff development time so that they truly understood the nature that it's not just a rolling average. That's just going to be ongoing communication. We're having middle school parents come up, explaining it parents' nights, just over and over again to get the notion. I'd be happy to do it for the school committee if you need an update on your briefing on how it works, because it is a little bit unique, very useful, but a little bit unique. And it doesn't make sense unless you know how it's structured. It can be confusing. So ongoing communication with that one, as long as we have that system. Recommendation 5, provide sufficient time for the completion of curriculum work. So what have we got? We've got common planning time for most staff within disciplines. So all the social studies, all the math, they have time off at the same time to do preparation work during their workday. Content team time on staff meetings on professional development days, right? We allow them to work with specific tasks during content team on the professional, either on Wednesdays when we have our regularly 3 times a month meeting, and or on partial release days and full release days. We will often say, you need to do this task with your content team during that time slot. We have instituted a common design template, very helpful. And we are giving currently, we have asked all staff members to use it and have 2 units ready to go for the fall before we leave in the spring or in June. So that, and we've given them the time to work on that, and that allows us to drop in and provide technical assistance as may be needed. Common assessments in 22 and 23, 24. One of the things that we're really trying to do, and this goes in with having a common curriculum, is to ensure that if you take Algebra 1 from one teacher and then you have to switch for some reason and go to a different teacher's classroom, it's pretty much the same stuff is being covered, you know, which seems on the face of it to like, of course, but in the world of 130 plus staff members, that's not always the case. And we really want to make sure that parents are able to know what it is, students are able to know what it is, teachers are clear about what the expectations of things getting covered in their classes is. So one of the ways to do that is common assessments. Staff knows that next fall, well, every quarter there will have to be a common assessment for courses. So American history, all of them will have to do something in common just to sort of keep them together, covering the same material. They don't have to do everything in common. You know, there will be great wailing and gnashing of teeth, but no. And what's interesting is that we have a trove of these from 2018. All of the departments had them from 2018. So we steered them back to their previous website, said, pull those down. If those don't work, come up with something new. But if they work still, don't reinvent the wheel. But remember, we're using those to figure out where we're at. Review, revision, implementation of standards is always ongoing. Either because the state changes them, new staff come on board. It's just time to, you know, everybody wants to be done with curriculum work. And I always remind them, you know, same root word as circle. You're always doing it. It's, you know, it's never a done deal because the students are ever changing, and you need to be thinking about all of the factors all the time. SIOP implementation is ongoing. Semester summative activities were put back in place this year in January, and they will occur again at the end of the year. We will do an evaluation as to whether they are forcing those alignments and common planning that we hope they are, and ultimately being a good measure of student learning. You know, that's the ultimate goal of having those. As well as there's lots of other reasons to have summative activities at the end of a quarter or semester, but one of those is to help build a structure of a very organized, orderly, guaranteed and viable curriculum for all students and families in Lewiston High School. One thing I will say, just, and this is completely as an aside, I have never worked in a district that takes professional development more seriously, nor provides greater tools to their staff to do it. It's really remarkable. And I say that anytime I run into folks, you know, whether it's PSYOP, whether it's phonemic awareness, any of that, it's like, there's an expectation, but there's the support. And I have never seen that in 30 years of education. So I appreciate that support from this board and the planning from central office to make it happen. Recommendation 6, ensure that staff has access to the revised curriculum and uses it to guide teaching and learning. We'll be putting it all online on school websites so that, you know, when you look at that 44.3% of the staff is new, you know, it's like, here's your key, you're an algebra teacher. Oops, you know, if you're just out of Farmington, you know, that's kind of a terrifying situation, and there's not. So part of it is to help assure over time that there's some continuity, to make sure, again, across teachers, there's some continuity, and parents will be able to, you know, look at these documents. Oh, that's what they're supposed to be doing, et cetera. Common assessments require the use of a common curriculum. Common unit planning is based on that curriculum. So as they're working on their common planning units right now, they're having to have that conversation about what are we actually teaching, you know, not what were we teaching, you know, 10 years ago, but what are we actually teaching now, and do those revisions. So those are in process. Recommendation 7, revise the school improvement plan, including an accurate timeline. You can read that. What I will say is the school improvement plan is going to be ongoing as part of the continuous needs assessment process. So each school, as you know, that receives Title I funding has to do a CNA every year. The high school doesn't get any Title I fundings, but rather than create something different, we're following the same model as if we were receiving Title I funding. So you will get a copy of the high school's continuous needs assessment document, and that will be revised every year based upon the data that we're getting back. Vision of the graduate also, when that's completed, that will serve as sort of as something to test ourselves against when we make decisions. Next one. So let's get to the commendations. So it's good to get the pat on the back, and we do great stuff, right? The diversity, inclusiveness, equity, they do drive decision making at the high school. Access to healthcare, physical and mental health services. Could we do more? Sure, but boy, there's an awful lot there. The community and district financial support for school improvement projects, that was noted. These are, by the way, all noted by the visiting committee. Community connections and collaborations to support students, schools' ability to recognize and advocate for student needs, student access to technology, both to demonstrate their learning, but also support their learning. It's not just, it's not just a word processor. It's actively used to help with instruction. Last slide. Lots of assistance programs, support programs. We're looking to expand these academically as well next year for the intellectual, social, and emotional well-being of the students. There is an awareness, a real awareness that, kids have very different learning styles for a variety of reasons. For some, it may be that they are new to America. For some, it may be that they went 2 years without any real school, right? And they've got some challenges. We're beginning to really differentiate. And when we go to those unit plans that we're having folks design with, one of the key things, how are you going to differentiate for the students you have in your class? When you look at their math scores from the NWEAs, and you recognize you've got this range, right? Back in the good old days, you used to pitch it right to the middle, and some kids were bored and some kids failed. How are you going to actually figure out how to get all kids over that mark and then challenge the ones for whom it's not that difficult, right? So that's but that's built into the design process at this point. Lots of pathways that we keep open to have students meet standards, so that if they have trouble the first time around, there's other ways to do it. We're gonna, one of the things that we're really hoping to do next year is make sure that more of that happens during the regularly scheduled school sessions, and so that we don't have to tack on ice week, mud week, summer school. That there's some more remediation and standards achievement that, remedial standards achievement that happens during the day. Efforts by staff to recruit, recommend, and outreach to find qualified person. We're going into hiring season. I'm talking to people. Anybody who wants to move to Lewiston, it's a great city. You can raise a family here. So trying to recruit some folks. That's in the past, and the district was noted is working hard on that in this report. And it's a challenge for all school districts right now, and lots of opportunities to remediate the standards. All right. But they noticed that we do have firm deadlines. It's not indefinite, and that was something that they commended us on. So that's the fast through 10 minutes. Happy to take questions.
Member Beauplan?
Thank you. I was involved with the 3 accreditation committees on the other side of the bridge, so I do have some familiarity with the process, although the latest little wrinkle that they throw in would take some getting used to. Was there any disagreement on any of the recommendations by any of the people that were hands-on this? And if so, is there some sort of appeal process or explanation?
So I got an advanced copy of this report, and I was only allowed to correct information that was factual information that was incorrect. So if we get to a point where, if there's a decision out of NEASC that's unfavorable in some way, I do believe there is a path to appeal. I don't know it exactly, but no, we had the meetings in November. We talked with folks. They sent us a draft report. We made corrections of fact, and we sent it back to them. And then this is what they're forwarding to their committee that meets in June.
I realize you've only had this less than a month, but are the people that were involved in the preparation of all this on board with the recommendations?
We haven't gone to a faculty vote yet on that. We give it to you first and the faculty will look over it.
Thank you. I guess I'm directing this one to our superintendent. There are costs associated to receive, to achieve these recommendations. In some cases, it's going to be a real allocation of resources. I'm concerned that we have a fixed budget proposal and where that puts us as far as meeting the needs, because if we don't get reaccredited, that's priority number 1A.
Yeah, there's definitely some costs associated with these recommendations. A lot of it is time, and time and compensation certainly are factors. This is a multi-year component. We have some deadlines throughout the process, and I think one of the reasons the vision of a graduate is an earlier benchmark is so that that can be used to measure some of the other progress. Some of the more costly items like security, I would say 90% of that is almost done or happening literally as we speak or during the days right now. Some of the other pieces they could recommend, but we may not be able to afford. So we're not mandated to do certain things. I know Principal Radke mentioned the door systems so that you know if a door has been opened or not. That may not be within our reach financially. And so we would work on other things where we can. Maybe it is within our reach in certain problem spots, things like that. So we'll do what we can, but this will certainly have some budget consideration and already has actually the preliminary information they had when they put together their proposal for us.
Thank you. Just a couple more things. At what point will a status determination be made? Whether we're approved or we're on probation or
that would be the job of the committee in June. So having been on multiple committees that reaccredited schools, I've seen longer lists and it's not been an issue. And usually, I mean, well, you can never predict what a committee is going to say. I mean, I believe we're in pretty good standing. I don't think our accreditation is at risk in any way.
I would concur, but I also want to add that the language of the recommendations is key. So you see things like improve, finalize, close out, those kinds of terminology versus missing, not found, not observed. I've seen that in some of the recommendation reports that I've been a part of because I've been on committees, but also I've seen schools receive that kind of language, and it's concerning. I know of schools that did not get their accreditation. This report is not a bad look from my perspective.
And just one more thing, and I don't want to belabor this minor point because we can discuss it over a fruit smoothie somewhere.
All right.
But we have a variety of pathways to meet the needs of students, which I think is wonderful. I contrast that, being a history teacher, you struck a nerve with a common curriculum. In the goal to meet the standards, there are, excuse me, animal lovers, many ways to skin a cat. You can look at international diplomacy through the Spanish-American War, or you can look at it through an Iraqi Afghanistan veteran who wants to spend time on that. So I'm kind of concerned here. Are we mandating it? If it's Tuesday, you must be in Belgium. And secondly, probably not. But how much of a percentage is allowed to the teachers to teach their specialty, their level of interest, where they can convey their enthusiasm, and hopefully it'll be, passed on to the students.
Sure, that's all driven by the standards, and the standards are not specific to the level of you have to teach international diplomacy by looking at the Spanish-American War, or you have to look at international diplomacy by looking at the Camp David Accords, or they're not that specific. You have to look at international diplomacy, and so that would be, I mean, it's always going to be a dance. I would say that probably they have about, I would say they're no more constrained than they are today in terms of how they reach it. It's the what we want to make sure that they teach in common. So constitutional processes in government, 5 or 6 different ways to teach that I can think of right now as an old government teacher off the top of my head. The important thing is, does a student understand how the federal government works, its relationship to the state government, its relationship to the local government, et cetera. So there's plenty of latitude in there, but that a student needs to walk away with an understanding of, the constitutional structures of the government and the division of powers and the separation of powers, it would be the standard that they're trying to reach.
I totally share that. I just want to make sure that there's some flexibility for the teachers. I may have shared before, across the river, we would get students from one middle school teacher who they knew the Holocaust upward and downward and backwards and forwards.
And that was it.
But that was it. But I just don't want to make sure that our teachers are not handcuffed to not have that flexibility. We have formative and summative assessments. I think there's room to allow some variety, but still, again, come up with the same end result. And we'll have that fruit smoothie. and
Yeah,
talk about
absolutely.
it.
Anytime.
Thank you.
Member Scott.
Thank you. So first off, I'm hoping that we can get a copy of that PowerPoint that you just shared, because that gives us a lot more information than just reading this report. I really appreciate that, because just reading the report can be concerning. I mean, I don't know how many parents read all of this, but I actually got a phone call this weekend that said, oh my God, like, are we failing on stuff? And there was concern about that. So hearing that other stuff and what's already being done and the process moving forward, I think is extremely helpful for us to answer those questions. So some of the stuff I wanted to talk about was in specific, I'm hoping that, I want to hear when the faculty votes on this. I want to hear as this process moves forward, where this is going, how the faculty feels about it. I think that would be important for us to know. I'd also like to address some of the stuff that was in the report itself, because it is some of the stuff that we've heard ourselves concerns about the school specific. And that would be like the vaping in the bathrooms, the safety at the school. Those are things that I think that we need to continue to address, and maybe specifically pull out some of these pieces for a workshop to discuss. Because even though there's things that are being worked on, these are things that we're still getting questions and conversations about to this day about some difficulties in the bathroom and the number of vaping and stuff. And I think we all need to have those conversations, and including parents to have those conversations. So if we have a workshop where we can have people, let's talk about this, and students as well, I think it's really important for them to see what this is and what we're talking about, safety in the schools. I mean, what can I say? I think we've been very, very lucky with what we've seen going across the country. And I fear this. I hate to have to fear this, but it is the way the world is. I watched a video last night. Several schools in other states that have these emergency buckets in the classroom, and they're literally buckets for locking down and for the students to be able to go to the bathroom when there's a shooter in the school, and they're locking down, and the teachers have blankets to cover if somebody's hurt and shot and all this other stuff. And that, it scared the crap out of me to think that, a few years ago, those discussions weren't even had. And now we're having schools that have to have this kind of safety. And I would like us to be prepared before we have to get to a level like that, because to me, that is frightening that a student or a teacher would even have to deal with that in their classroom and have those conversations, when the conversations we should be having is the education of our students and where they're going to go in their future. That should be the only thing we're having. That's not the way our country is right now. So I think that we need to continue those specific conversations, have specific workshops on this. I hope everybody read this report. I read the whole thing, and I think there's a lot of things that we can use in here to help each other out, to help you, and to ensure that our community understands that these are focuses we're taking on this, and they're very important focuses that we need to take: the graduation, the safety, and what's actually happening in our schools. And I really hope, again, that we have the students involved in those conversations. Thank you.
Any other questions? Member Eames?
Thank you. I just wanted to commend us for the report result where we meets the standards all the way across the support the students measure. And I think that's probably an ironic or sad, ironically good result from the DOJ problem. But actually it ended up with that turning out really well, that we got really good results on all of the student support measures. So even if it doesn't feel perfect, at least everyone should know that we are getting really good marks on that front. So I wanted to say that. And then I was wondering if we'd seen this, the September school-wide growth plan. Had we seen that? I don't remember seeing that. It was mentioned here as if it was well known. but
It was a document we submitted to NEASC.
To them,
Yeah.
not to us.
Yeah, it was
Okay,
not a
yeah.
public.
Yeah, I didn't remember it, so
Yeah.
that's why I wasn't losing it. And I just think it's funny that they think that finding the vision for graduates is going to be the magic pill that solves everything. So.
Anyone else? Did you have anything to add? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Agenda item 9 is to receive and potentially vote on the snow day early release proposal policy EBCE.
So recently we had a snow day and I watched out the window all day long praying for bad weather because we had canceled school. And really what we knew was the storm was really not going to hit at least our immediate area. So probably between that 2 to 5 window. And when we put kids on buses that are later dismissals, they're commuting in the midst of that. And so with that concern, and they had kind of called for it coming on pretty fast once it starts, we cancel school. I think at the end of the day, everyone would have been home safe with about a half an hour to spare. And it did, like a light switch, get really nasty outside. But it just kept resonating with me, and staff have been reaching out, and some of our own team here been reaching out, and the LEA's asked a couple questions too of, have we ever thought about putting the early release back in play? And so I did a little digging, and I don't know the complete history, but I know it's a very sensitive topic because what happened a long time ago was there was an early release and students were left out in the cold, very young students out in the cold because no one knew they had been released and there was no one around to receive them, not even neighbors. And so this was the kind of thing that we would never approve or stand for. So we got talking about if we could have it back, how would we implement it? And so what I shared with you in the memo was just to start a conversation. Doesn't have to be approved tonight unless you're comfortable with it or just want to make edits to it, looking for recommendations. And maybe it's just a moot point. Maybe the committee doesn't want to move forward with this at this time. But when we look at COVID and busing and all the communication shifts that have occurred over the last few years, I feel a level of confidence in being able to let people know, but we'd want to do so in advance. So one of the ideas was to say, hey, look, watch the weather, catch that 6 o'clock report, try to figure out the metrics of the day and make a decision later in the evening to let people know that tomorrow will be an early release day. But we would follow the same release schedule that we use when we have our 2-hour early releases on our Wednesdays. And then we would just make sure the communication went out again in advance and be very clear. So the problem that we have internally is logistically, it messes up all kinds of things. It interferes with the potential for certain pre-K runs. It interferes with our ability to serve lunches at a normal time because to get all the students through the line, we have to start much earlier. There's some other logistical things we want to be mindful of. Because we don't know what that next day might do, I think we would cancel our after-school activities as scheduled because we have transportation connected to those, but leave like events like a concert or an athletic event or things like that open till the day happens. So we know what the weather actually does in case we get one of those storms that slides just south of us again. But I just wanted to start the discussion, make a proposal, put some criteria to it. The benefits of having early release days, if we do it and we communicate it well and it works, we don't have to make up those days in June. We don't have to talk about the teacher exchange day being moved to the end of the year instead of in April, things like that, that could be a challenge, but want to at least put it in front of you and see what your thoughts were.
Member Hurd.
Thank you. I think this is great because we've had lots of conversations about, why does Auburn offer remote days and they don't have to go as long because they're offering this, and this is kind of in between. So you're not really asking students and teachers to prepare for at-home remote snow days, but you're offering an opportunity to get out early. I think the only thing that would is a potential downfall, again, as you said, like the pre-K, because they're already not going on Wednesdays anyway. So if there was a snow day that falled on a Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, then that's just one more day that they're not in the classroom. But I think other than that, I think it's great. Any additional time we can add to get our students out earlier, I think is a win-win.
Member Bopolant?
Thank you. If we had our own in-house transportation bus department, it would be very easy to direct them to do that, but we are contracted to Hudson. Would Hudson be able to accommodate us?
Yes, we did include them in the conversation before we put it in this memo logistically. And they said that, yes, they absolutely can do that. And they would actually encourage the vote, at least I believe, because they're the ones out there driving in that compromised weather. And as they get paid hourly, if we have a no school day and there's no weather, they're not getting paid. And so I think they'd be supportive of that earlier run.
Member Damon?
I guess one of the challenges in all that is how does that affect our out of district placement students?
So that topic has come up, and out of district placements vary. And sometimes they do what we do, and sometimes they do what they do. And so I think what we'd have to do is if this is enacted, we would have to have a list of all of our contracted partners and make sure we ensure that if we intend for our students to be home at an earlier time because of weather, if that's the decision we have made, then it should be applicable across the board.
Would that have an impact on our 5 common days that we wouldn't be within the region?
No, I think inclement weather in part. So what happens with an early release is it counts as a day because students are there for long enough of duration to meet the terms of a day. And also they're served lunch, which is a big factor.
But if 2 of the other districts decided that they were not having school because they declared a snow day and we have school, does that impact those 5 common days?
Yes and no. So it actually does, in fact. So there's some days at the end of the year with LRTC where like seniors are done from a certain school district that has had more snow days than us. This happens with like Levitt and Poland a lot because they're more west. And they will actually send their students for additional days. So at the end of the year for like LRTC with those dissimilar day calendar counts, you may see pockets of kids there one day that were probably not scheduled to be there because of snow. So it can impact the dissimilar days calculation. But again, if it's an early release, it doesn't from that perspective because it counts as a day. But when others have no school, it does impact the regional calendar.
Member Scott?
Thank you. So I remember this conversation. And it was quite the conversation, and there was a lot of feedback from the parents. So I think first off, we have to ensure that our parents are being given the opportunity to give feedback on this. I would agree. Some people, I saw the post on social media that day, that storm. The people saying, well, why don't we have early release days? We could have all gone to school today, blah, blah, blah. And it goes on. But the reality is that that's a few people posting on social media. That is not the district as a whole. And some of the bigger conversations that happened, not only that story that you told at the beginning, but there were parents that were seriously affected by how do I get home from school? How do I ensure that I have somebody to take care of my kids? You're going to release my kids at whatever time, and now I have nowhere to go. So those are the things I remember as part of this conversation, which is why we had stopped doing early release days because we had a lot of complaints the other way. So if we switch it again, we have to make sure that we're doing what and ensure, but it's new time. So maybe with our new we have different communication now, more ways to communicate with parents. Maybe it'll be effectual that way, but I just want to ensure that before we move anywhere with this or vote to approve it, we ensure all of that, but also what Member Damon and what Member Bopolant brought up are also 2 very valid points that we have to ensure that all of our stakeholders are in place for doing something like this. Because we will hear the backlash the other way the next year when we have a storm and we release and all of these parents come to us and say, my kids were either outside, I couldn't find somebody to pick them up. Those conversations are going to happen because I've been there when it happened before.
They absolutely will. Some of the feedback from the management team was exactly that of, so when nobody picks up the kids, what's the plan? Because if the first time we do this, what's gonna happen? I also want to note, we definitely want opportunities for public input. This would be policy, so I didn't even bring this as policy today, just kind of the memo of, do you want us to proceed with this kind of conversation? I think the policy subcommittee would have to look at it. It would definitely need 2 reads and public notice, so I didn't take this one lightly because it's hard for some people to get out of work and what have you. We just want to make sure everybody gets home safe.
Member Heard.
I just want to add too, if we can have an early release day 2 days after coming back from April break, we can do early release nowadays. I have confidence in us that we can do it.
So we're not going to vote on this tonight.
I guess just to make sure that there's direction from the committee to bring this to policy, or this point, just to work on language and then get it out publicly. Yes, okay, we can do that.
Yes, Member Scott.
So just to recognize also that, you know, we have policy discussions, we're having policy discussions tonight. There's nobody here. I don't know how many people are watching. So it goes to the policy committee. I'm all in favor of that doing and looking at that conversation. But I almost think we need to put word out to the community, to the parents, to let them have a say in this, an actual, whether that's a letter, an email, a survey monkey, something. Because if we don't, we're gonna get pushback if we vote something in with that, and they're gonna say, we didn't know about this. So
The policy committee can send out we can craft a survey monkey or something and send something like that out. Yeah, okay. Okay. The budget is next. Do you want to do that before you want to take a break before we get into budget? Okay, we are going to take a 5-minute break. Agenda item number 10 is to receive a budget update with a potential vote.
So I shared in the packet, but I did not bring printouts tonight, so I'm going to put it up on the screen in case anyone wants to look. The ongoing work has been what can we do and what do we have? As you know, we presented to the the city council recently. And I guess my takeaway from feedback from that point was that they believe that $1.70 was too high. I know that there are members of the school committee that may not agree that it's too high. So what I tried to do was strike a balance with the things that we had been talking about. Make sure I get the right item here. So I want to put up on the screen what we put together a few different options as potential things to consider tonight. And one of them being going back to the conversation about a reserve, but using very specific language so that anything that becomes reserve fund would be voted on first off. Second, would require a vote of the school committee and the city council to be used with that specific language in the future. And I think that's a good system of checks and balances. But it allows us to work on what I'm calling tonight the 800,000. And when I say that, I'm referring to the special purpose private school changes. So we did get some additional state subsidy, which helped us curb some things in our last meeting. And these proposals here, there's 3 items. First one is to create that reserve. If we do so, I think we can get to the $1.34, which has been a bit of a target, I think, from the school committee. The second option would be to stay the course at $1.70. I don't think that would get council approval. But I also know that there's some strong support for that for some people. And then the third option would be to not use a reserve approach, but just use additional fund balance and add the $800,000 into the budget and fund it from our existing fund balance directly. The reason I included the reserve versus fund balance approach, I think the reserve allows you to, as I noted in my first paragraph here, or this first option here, that it would allow us to fund cost unanticipated or emergency in nature that would impact educational programming. And the language I had put in there first, before we made some edits, was this budget is extremely, extremely lean. I cannot emphasize that to you enough. When I heard $1 at the city council meeting, it made my whole system pause. It really did. I don't know if you could see that on my face when it happened. We're talking about not providing services. We're talking about not serving our kids well. And to be honest, if I'm charged with going to find a way for us to be at $1, it's all of the terms that we don't want to have for our kids. So I didn't present that to you tonight because I, to be honest, don't know how to get there. If we have to find a way there, it'll be incredibly hard. And again, none of it will feel right because it's really going to put us in a position that I believe we would face legal implications down the road from not providing services that are going to cost 10 times whatever we cut in this budget proposal. And I don't say that to be doom and gloom. I just think that's a reality. So if we do a reserve approach, it would allow the committee to vote on a situation or request for fund use. If approved here, it would have to go to city council to also be approved. But it doesn't go to referendum. So essentially in the reserve approach, you do the referendum up front, and then you have some options. In the fund balance use directly, my concern there is it doesn't put money in a reserve. It puts money in the budget, which doesn't have those levels of checks and balances. So the budget becomes inflated and the money becomes available. The school committee would have the discretion to spend that money as it wishes. I don't think that's the intent with this $800,000 question that we have on special ed right now. So that's why I would lean away from that option number 3. So with those pieces of information, both options 1 and 3, get us to a mill rate of $1.34. Option 1 creates a reserve, which still has checks and balances. Option 3 uses fund balance directly, which again, in my opinion, it loses checks and balances, and that's not the intention. I did include some of the other items you've seen before, the reductions in cost drivers, the fact that we've cut 61 positions, again, a lot of them vacant, but not all. The fact that we just have these increases from contractual obligations, inflation, sunsetting funds, and the big hit from that reduced state subsidy is absolutely, I want to use the word devastating to this community. The idea that we got less funding the way we did in a market of CBAs and contracts that grow and inflating cost is a very challenging situation for us to be in. I won't review all of them. These are the same talking points that we've had. I included the reduction factoring, but ultimately my recommendation is option 1 here on the screen. And that would be to create I chose $2 million because of how lean we've run. And if it does approach that 8, that's a small enough amount that I don't think anything erratic could happen with it. But it's big enough if we need it, but small enough to become fund balance in the future if it's not used. And reserve accounts can stay. And so part of this language, I want to further talk about why I think a reserve, because I know that one member of the public came up and spoke about reserves, and I just disagree with the approach that member of the public shared. And I've talked to that person since then. And I think it might have been a mistake what was being said. I think the idea of using a fund balance was the thing that was a thing of caution. I also want to note that we looked at the legal process for this. So fund balances for schools are relatively new in practice. They've only been around for a handful of years now, and they have to be descript, and there's only certain ways in which you can use them. Utility cost increases, gas increases, things like this, rule change that are on the horizon. And so when you do that, the funds can stay there until acted upon to be different. Here's how this benefits us, I think, in Lewiston. If we specifically create that reserve in that way, 1 year from now, that money still sits in reserve. So it becomes a part of our accounting package. And then it can be used for future conversations in that way, or can be altered through referendum to be used differently. But it starts to become a pot of money that the school committee, the city council, and voters have control over in the current fiscal year. The alternate to all of this would be to do nothing, and then if the $800,000 is needed, you can ask for an emergency referendum. Our community, I don't think, is real responsive to emergency referendums when there's a budget shortfall. So I would be hesitant to take that approach. It doesn't feel like good fiscal planning. It feels, whenever you say the word emergency and fiscal in the same sentence, it feels like poor planning. And I don't want to be the one to say, we chose this plan, but now we're saying emergency vote.
Member Whitlam?
So with the 2 million in reserves, what's the mill rate adjustment? Is that the 134? Is that the 1?
So if we go with the reserve approach, we'd use more fund balance this year, but it would be money we hope to not spend. And if we do spend, it has very specific checks and balances, so would not impact the mill rate. It would put us at the $1.34. Yes.
And if we go with option 1 and this rule change plays out and it ends up being the 800,000, that would come out of the fund balance?
So fund balance would be used to create this reserve. So at that point, let's say next January, we hit the wall, we've spent, or we're projecting to spend all the money and need more because of a rule change. We would come back to the committee with a proposal to spend money from reserves to cover our tuition cost for the students. It would then have to go to city to be approved, to be spent. The nice thing about that, even though it's hard to approve those things mid-year, is it's appropriated for that, and it's a real cost that is live. And so when you go to ask the city, I think, for more dollars in that sense, it's what it was saved for. I know I did for a while using an envelope system. When I wanted something, I'd put money in an envelope and I tuck it away in a little bit and add a little bit. This is, to me, this is that envelope budgeting approach to a problem that may never happen. And those monies don't get spent in any other way unintended because of the rules that are in place for checks and balances. Sorry, I kind of went off on more of an example than you asked, but to me, it's a better financial practice.
I think I'm just confused. So if we don't have a reserve
Mhm.
and we need that extra 800,000, what is the process? It has to go to referendum?
We'd have to get approved here, approved city, and have a special referendum.
And if we already have that in a reserve, then we just approve it here
And city.
and city, but there's no
No
public.
referendum.
Okay,
And the reason there's no referendum is it would happen in May. So it would still be voted on locally, but it would happen in a few weeks instead of,
they would be voting for it ahead of time instead of after the fact, right?
right?
Like,
It would
okay.
be, it would be noted as part of our budget that in our proposal for the budget, we are also proposing a $2 million reserve with the specific ties to anything that would interrupt our ability to do educational programming or special purpose private school tuition.
Member Eames?
I don't think the city council understands that they would have a say in that. Just having heard been at most of the city council meetings lately and watching if I wasn't there, it seems like they're confused on that. And I think it would be in our interest to clarify that with them. If we voted on number one, that they would still have some kind of say over that budget. Might feed their ego a little.
I'll make note of that. Thank you.
Member Scott?
So I think what needs to be done here is when this goes next Tuesday to city council for city council's vote, when Jake's there presenting this, because it has to be on the referendum the following week. Jake's presenting it to the city council that this is a reserve specific for this. If we vote to approve that Tuesday night, that's part of our approval of the full budget. So they're also approving that this reserve is there only for those specific needs. So that would explain, I think, Member Eames, that they cannot touch that this is not something that they can say, well, we want to use that or appropriate it for this. It is only specifically appropriated for what Jake just described. Right? So then, and then it goes on the ballot on the 10th. And then if it has to be used, we'll say in 6 weeks from now, the state says we do need that $800,000 for special purpose private schools. It would be the approval of us and then the school and then the city council. Jake would go to the city council and say, that came through. We need the $800,000. They already have approved to use that money for that. I don't see how they could say no. Right? And say, well, we don't approve you using that money because that's specifically what it's there for. And they already approved that next week. Does that make sense? I know.
My 2 cents like to go with that is, to me, the great fear in public funding is always, well, we approve it and then somebody does something else with it. This restricts that explicitly. It is the checks and balances that would have to go back to school and city. I would also say that the city could be suggestive about how that money gets spent, but it can't be touched unless the school committee approves it. So it's got a two-way checks and balance to it.
Member Beaupont?
Thank you. Jake, you've been very erudite in explaining this, and I know you've had your administrative team give input on this. I just want to make sure we're not doing anything in the vacuum, and I wish former Committeeman Potvin was here to give his 2 cents on, and I wouldn't expect anyone to speak for him, but can you kind of give a little balance on the scale, what the negatives would be for number one, the hazards, the concerns?
Yeah, so I think a few things. One is I asked area superintendents from the Western Maine group, which extends from Lisbon, Oak Hill, all the way across through Oxford County, who has a reserve set up. Every single superintendent that responded has a reserve of some kind. Some of them have 3, 4, or 5 of them that include multiple different ventures. Some districts add to them annually on purpose as part of their process, and they're building funds in different ways. So that's one thing to consider, that that's not us operating in a reserve. Actually, I think the vacuum we're operating in is our own, to not have a reserve as an organization this size. But I would say too, like the only downfall that I can see from option one, or the biggest downfall, would be if it's not approved at the city level. And then we are back at a different drawing board. And even still, I don't know if this committee will support further cuts or different use of funds. I'm always going to be hesitant about using additional fund balance for something that is committed that we can't cycle back through our school system, because we're starting with that $5 million. It's a big number.
Thank you. I was also, we remember from the last meeting, one of the more vocal and determined members that we should have the $1.74 levy in, and my main concern was the city council making fair determinations on their budget. I was particularly upset, for some reason it was a pebble in my shoe, on that six-figure new position. So I'd like to ask Member Scott if there's been any biting the bullet on the city council level.
If I may. And I apologize, that is what we were talking about when you almost gavelled me, so just so that. So in the city budget, there is, on page 18, there were several pieces in there that were to be new programs or services requested from the different departments. And I think one of the big questions was, you know, the deputy fire chief with a very, very costly price. None of those things on that page are being approved this year. None of those are happening. So the city has made significant cuts as well. Very significant cuts. That was new positions. Oh, there's other positions that are now being frozen. There are positions that won't be filled. So just so that I can elaborate, our meeting on Thursday, City Administrator Hunter gave us 3 different proposals to work with. That initially, from our initial proposals from both the school department and the city, cut everything significantly. The 3 proposals include the city using additional revenue that we've received from the state, putting that aside and cutting down the tax rate to the mill rate to $29.90 with no charge from the city at all, and $1.34 from the school department and 6 cents from the county. The second one was $30.16 for the mill rate, with $26 from the city, $1.34 from the school, and 6 cents from the county. And the third option was for a mill rate of $30 with 10 cents, $1.34, and 6 cents. So that's every option had the school at $1.34, not the dollar option. That option was not discussed again on Thursday. It was always the $1.34. And each one of these options had the city council either a further reduction in advertising, we're freezing one mechanic, we're freezing one highway worker. We will be able to hire the fire inspector, but reducing the library to 40 hours and eliminating a position at the library. Eliminating some contingency plans. Some of the others were removal of some cameras. There was all sorts of different things. So those discussions have been had on the city level as well. There is still a discussion from the city and from some members of the city council that the school committee should cut more. I can't speak for what those counselors want. I can speak that I can fight for $1.34, and I think that's where we're at. And I know that's what City Administrator Hunter has presented to the council as the final line, having spoken to the superintendent, that would be what the vote is for, $1.34. I wish we could do more. I do. And I know that we all wish we could do a lot more, but we have to find compromise here. There is some major cuts. There's some major sacrifices that are being made across the board. You know, we're having discussions even to the point of not spending $50,000 on a bridge that needs to be repaired, and which would actually help. If that work is done now, it's going to eliminate a massive cost 3 years down the road of that bridge having to be completely repaired, that sort of stuff. And we're talking about eliminating that $50,000 for now. So those conversations are happening as well. Yes.
You okay, Paul? That was it? Okay. Member Eames?
I just wanted to remind the public that we've been working on these cuts for a long time. So the implication at the last city council meeting was that we need to start cutting because we haven't. And I just want to be very clear, we have been cutting. Seriously.
Member Damon?
I think one of my concerns, and I haven't spoken to former member Potvin about it, but one of my concerns is the continued depletion of the fund balances. If we can believe what was proposed up at the state the other day, that the minimum teacher salary is going to be proposed to increase by $2,500 a year for the next 4 years to get minimum teacher salaries to $50,000, which I'm all in support of that. I mean, teachers, we need to make sure that we're paying teachers what is appropriate for the work that they're doing. But if my calculations are right, if we took the $2,500 and tacked it on to the bottom of our scale, having gone through this whole negotiations process with just the teachers union alone, that $2,500, because it pushes the entire scale up, would probably add something in the range of $3 to $3.3 million in salaries and benefits for each of the next 4 years. And when you compound it with steps, you're talking about a salary increase for the teachers alone, probably in excess of $14 million. Those will be contractual measures that we have no control over. My guess is the state will just say, well, everybody's got to raise it, and that they're not going to participate any more than they participated when we went from 35 to 40. They kept saying that there was going to be some help for districts, and it didn't ever occur. Looking at that potentially hitting next year when we go back into contract negotiations with the teachers union, again, there will be other things that happen to that. That $14 million is going to be such a reach. And if we've completely depleted our fund balances, we won't have, as Jake has said, we have the $5 million to start with to help the cuts that we started with. It won't be there. Then what? And that's my biggest concern about depleting any of these fund balances by this, because this stuff down the road, we're going to have no control over. That could be absolutely devastating. Now, someone's going to say, well, we're going to get $8 million a year from the new transformer thing from CMP. Maybe, but the reality is that's not all going to be that's not all going to be available to the school department. Some of it should be, our third of the ask should be, but that's not really within our control. I just am really, really concerned about depleting these fund balances to this level. I understand about the reserve account. It's probably the mechanism that we may end up having to do, good, bad, or otherwise. But when I see the report that John just read to us about things that we need to do to the facilities, upgrading, the bathrooms and things like that. And we've heard this whole bathroom discussion repeatedly. Unless we can be assured that some of those dollars would be available in the LCIP, and I listened to the LCIP discussion a little bit the other night, it seems as though that some of what we think are priorities are not necessarily priorities for this council. And that concerns me. The last thing we need to do is have some sort of incident happen at the high school over something that was preventable, but we've continued to just kick it down the road, and then we don't have the funds to fix it. That's really where I'm coming from. And I'm going to be really hard pressed to support the $1.34. I know it's what's out there, but it's not an appropriate level of budgeting for a district of this size with this type of need within our student body.
Member Bowden.
Thank you. Jake, I'm hoping you could talk to this a little bit. So why would we do 2 million reserve with our fund balance instead of the $800,000 in a reserve just to reduce the mill rate? Like, why? I know you're saying like for just in case a special situation happens, but in a budget season like this, is it necessary to go the 2 million out of our fund balance instead of just the 800,000? I'm just why option 1 over option 3?
I think my initial thinking is around having that reserve available for other things that are really, really lean. In actuality, the committee could approve using 800,000 to create that reserves explicitly for this purpose. That's not wrong. That does cover things if we're talking about the $1.34, if that's what the committee wants. So that is certainly a feasible thing. It doesn't have to be the 2 million.
Okay, I'm just thinking like for us, wouldn't it make more sense to leave that 1.2 in the fund balance for the future? Since we talk about that all the time, like we don't want to keep taking out of that. We don't want to set ourselves up in future years. So I guess for me, I'm leaning towards option 3. I'm comfortable with the $1.34. I'm hoping city council is comfortable with the $1.34. That wasn't really the impression I got when we sat in the meeting. But I'm encouraged to hear Councillor Scott say that, you know, the city budget is basically giving us the $1.34 in their budget options. I like to hear that, so I'm happy with that. But as I said, I think I'm just more comfortable going with the 800,000 and leaving that extra 1.2 mil in there for the next budget season. That's just me.
Member Scott?
Thank you. Sorry, Member Hurd. I think it's important to also recognize that, you know, that's what the city administrator presented to us on Thursday. I cannot, nor can I even pretend to speak to what every city councilor is thinking on this budget. I will ask them tomorrow if they're comfortable with this. I think it's important that we as a school committee know and are kind of have, I don't know if you call it a guarantee, but some reassurance that that is where they're sitting and they don't change their mind next Tuesday, because it would be, I think, well, it's an uncomfortable situation for both groups of folks. So I am going to ask them that. I would like to see that. That is what the city administrator presented to us. Again, I can't speak to what it's going to be. I can't speak to if others are going to want it to be less. We have a conversation tomorrow night. We have another conversation scheduled for Thursday. We only have workshops this week on the budget. So I'm hoping that we hear more clarification on that tomorrow night. I am going to ask again specifically, because I am trying to navigate between both of these boards and seeing where we're at. And it's quite difficult to see, you know, and ensuring that we're being fiscally responsible to our whole community. And I know that's where we all are here. And I have to say that I think that's where city councilors' minds are trying to be as well. And we have to recognize that. We may not all agree on where it should be spent or how it should be spent or how much money there is. But I think we all came into these positions because we want the best interests of the city. So it's tough. It's really difficult. And I just want to put that out there that I can't guarantee that. That's where we were last Thursday.
Member Hurd?
Thank you. Option 3, that's not having a reserve at all, correct?
Correct. That would just be essentially putting back in the budget the $800,000, but using fund balance as a revenue to cover it. So it creates that $1.34.
Okay, so I like the idea of a reserve. I feel like if we all look at our own finances, kind of what you were saying with the envelope, like you have a savings account. So if your furnace goes, or you have a vacation club to go on vacation, or like me, you have a secret Target fund so your husband doesn't see what you're spending at Target every day. But I agree with Member Bowden. I'm not like, I feel like the $2 million is just like this arbitrary number up there that we're just throwing out there that, you know, and again, same thing that Member Bowden was saying is if we take money, we're looking 3 years out here. So like if we take the money now, it's not what next year looks like, it's the year after that and then the year after that. So I feel like a reserve is a good option because you never know what's going to happen. And like Member Damon said, there could be some things that come up that we need to fund that we may not have in the current budget. And so that would give us an option for that. I just don't know if like the 2 million is the it number, like maybe it's 1 million, maybe it's 1.5, maybe it's 1.3. I don't know. And I would like maybe open that up for discussion. Like, do any other members feel like there's a number that they would feel more comfortable with? Or do members feel like 2 million is a good number, or should we put more, or kind of like where we're at?
I think it's arbitrary no matter what number we pick, because we don't know what could go wrong. So whatever number that is, it's just a guess on what we might possibly need.
I didn't have 2 million etched in stone. Actually, I think it was Bill that asked me the other day or prior when we were talking about potentially doing 3 million. He was like, well, why 3 and not 2 or 1? And it was a number that I don't want to say I fixated on, but it landed it in my head as if we had certain amounts of money in reserve and these kinds of things pop up. Remember, the 800,000 is an estimate from a piece of paper, given the number of kids that we have enrolled currently, not an additional enrollment, not a change in tuition dollars. We don't know how this rule will read. And I guess I always try to budget my expenditures high. And my savings low. So with fund balance, I worry about that number like everyone here is. And how I got to 2 million instead of 800,000 was, what if we do place more kids, and what if that tuition does go up and it ends up being 1.4 or 1.5? I didn't have a solid number, so I figured if we're going to have a reserve, have it be big enough to cover that situation should it occur. But it doesn't have to be by any stretch. I think the idea that we're still continuing to talk about this $800,000 that we don't know if it will occur because of state rule, changing, I think is mind blowing in a sense, but we have to talk about it because we can't just not budget for it. But I think to your point, 2 million is not the hard number for me as much as just trying to think and navigate all the winds that could blow, and that would definitely cover things.
Just a follow-up question for that. Where, if it was 2 million, what does that look like for our fund balance in like 2, 3, 4, 5?
Yeah, so it would take this year's from roughly around 10 that's unencumbered to 3, because we'd be using 5 initially to start the budget, 2 additional in this reserve. And then any unspent funds this year would populate into fund balance in the future. So there's concerns there. The good piece, if you will, about fund balance is whatever we didn't spend this year, and we've been pretty good this year, whatever we don't spend this year goes back into that fund balance cycle. And then any reserve funds can also be put back into cycle as needed through a budget process.
Member Bowden?
Yeah, so I agree with what Megan said and what you're saying about like having some reserve there. What if we did the reserve at like 500,000? So it went up to 1.3 instead of 2. I just feel like if we go down to 3,000 or 3 million, I'm sorry, that's a shortfall. I mean, we're basically, and I understand that it can stay in there if we don't use it, but I don't know. It just seems like we're setting ourselves up, and this is kind of an impossible situation. I just can't support setting 2 million aside just in case.
Yeah, I'm certainly open to the will of the committee, and I'll try to guide it as best I can with what's out there. But I'll also echo Member Damon's concern about reducing the ask. Is all of these reductions in ask have an end result in a 2 or 3 year cycle of either more money has to come in from somewhere, or significant amounts of money will have to be cut.
Member Hurd?
Thank you. And this is also too, we need to remember, like, we're in the process of potentially securing a grant for facilities. So there's potential cost savings there when it comes to the energy audit. We've also talked about sending some stuff back out to bid. So there's potential cost decreases there. So I think I feel comfortable with the reserve if we're like making really good faith efforts to reduce some costs going forward. We're back into like the normal school year, the normal routine of things. So we need to get back into those types of things. So I mean, like Member Park said, the number is arbitrary no matter what number it is. So I don't really feel one way or another towards the number, but I think I feel more comfortable with the reserve than not having anything at all.
So I'll say this, so long as I'm sitting here, this money could go directly in the budget and use fund balance to pay for it, and I won't spend it unless we have to. That's where I sit. The reserve has different checks and balances. The best financial way for school stability or public school funding stability, which the model itself is broken, as we know, would be to ask for additional funds. If we can't do that, we could use fund balance, create a separate space for that in detail and not touch it unless we absolutely have to. Again, that's as long as I'm sitting here. But as the lead fiscal agent of Lewiston Public Schools, if I'm not sitting here and it's somebody else, although it'd probably have to be a different Bill or a different Adam or a different Karen, because they would also follow the same line because we believe in doing things the right way. But if someone else were sitting here, they could spend that money because it's in the budget and it's been approved, and a different fiscal agent could spend it that way. Now, I don't plan on going anywhere. But I just want you to know that with an election cycle and a different school committee, someone could decide to spend that money on, I don't know, whatever they feel like, if it was approved at the school committee level.
Was the estimate at some budget meeting, the estimate of what will roll back into the fund balance at the end of this fiscal year was around 4 million? Is that correct?
We thought it was gonna be closer to 3, but we're not certain on that until we get there. Adam doesn't like it when I project because it's hard to do. But looking at financials, we've had a good year and not a good year, but the labor shortage and other cost constraints, and using ESSER funds, we have tried to position Lewiston Public Schools to have additional fund balance moving into next year. So that 3 that I just mentioned, it's not going to stay at 3, but again, it's not going to jump back up to 10 by any stretch.
Member Scott?
And a reminder that, we've already, the positions that have been eliminated were positions that could not be unfilled. I mean, there are some in there that were not that way, but we also had money in that fund balance because we didn't have buses running for 2 years with COVID sometimes. And we had, things that had changed. That's why we have that money. That's not possibly going to happen again. So I think we do have to be careful with where we're going with this in the future. I would be concerned. I mean, this is an election year. I can't imagine. I mean, I would hope that the state at some point is going to have a decision made before November about this special purpose private school and how much they think they're going to need. But I would agree 2 million seems a lot. I want to, as much as we can, and we won't get that number of what are possible we have until after the end of the fiscal year. This is closer to the end of the year where we will know that. So it's hard to say what that might be. I mean, it could be 3 million, it could be 1.8, it could be 4.2. You don't know until we're done the fiscal year. So I think that should be left as a conversation to fill that up the next time. I would be comfortable, I think, more with just the 800,000 in that reserve, knowing we don't know. I mean, hoping, I trust and I have faith that you and Bill and Adam and all the team would be making that decision if something were to happen. But I don't know. We don't know when the state's going to do that. I feel like I don't know. At this point, I'm honestly feeling like, what do we do? And how do we figure this all out?
I feel like if we do just the 800,000, and that's an estimate anyways, if it's more than that, we're screwed, to put it plainly. So I feel like there has, if this is the focus, if the 800,000 is the focus for the reserve and not so that we have money for other things that might come up, I think we need a little bit more of a window just in case. But if we're also planning for any other unexpected things, I think that we need it a little bit higher than that as well. I don't have the number either, because again, it's just a guess, but I don't think I'd be comfortable with just the 800,000 in the reserve, because that's a made up number. Member Bowden?
I know we keep saying it's arbitrary, but how would you feel about 1 million in reserve? Would you be comfortable with that? If I were to make a motion to put option 3, but with 1 million in reserve?
I'm more comfortable deferring it back to Jake for what he's comfortable with, because he knows it better than we do.
Yes, option 1. I mean, can I make a motion right now? Is it too soon?
It would stop the discussion.
Okay, oh well, okay, we'll let the discussion continue, but.
Discussion happens once someone seconds it, so.
Okay. So then I would like to make a motion that we go with option 1, but do 1 million instead of 2 million.
I'll
That'd be my
second
motion.
that.
Further discussion. Jake, were you were gonna say something?
I just wanted to make sure that I was clear that you were talking about a reserve versus additional fund balance.
Yes, I was talking about a reserve.
It's still additional fund balance. It's just the way in
Yes.
which it lands.
Yes.
Member Eames?
Well, I just wanted to ask Jake if he's comfortable with that as a number. Is that sufficient for your dream of a reserve? Because it seems like you do want a reserve in principle. Is $1 million with an uncertain figure for the out-of-district placement problem? Is $1 million sufficient for you? Or do you, sorry to put you on the spot, but I really want to get a sense from you about what 2 million you said was just a number. 1 million is a number. That is.
Yeah, so I mean,
And I don't know
they're-
what
they're
your
big
emotional
numbers.
attachment to the two numbers is.
I actually think not knowing how this conversation would go, and we still don't know what city will do. The idea of having $1 million in reserve, if that's approved by this committee, makes me feel a whole lot better about this unknown massive bill that might never come. And I would rather have it identified in the budget as a potential thing, whether it's a reserve or just in the general fund that, again, has detail and we don't spend it so long as we're around, would make me a lot more comfortable moving forward than to not have either of those items. I don't want to have a big bill show up and have no plan for it. That's my biggest concern. So I could live with that.
Member Damon?
A lot of things that we're talking about are, we're saying, well, things that we can't plan about or we don't know about. Well, we know for a fact that we're just now entering into negotiations with 3 of our bargaining units. And there's been no money decided yet on any of those. Those could have a fairly significant impact on our current year or the next year's budget that we don't know yet. So for all that we say, well, the out of placement one is an unknown, I can pretty much guarantee you that those 3 contracts are going to increase our costs and that we know that. They're not, those units are not as big as the teacher's contract, but they're significant numbers of people. We're talking several hundred employees. Well, the teachers will come up. I mean, we know that there are at least 2, and I'm thinking there was a third one, a small one there somewhere, but either way, we also know that we know that those 2 affect over 100 employees. So those costs are going to be something we're going to have to deal with. When we start talking a budget that's this lean, those things all cost, and it's not just wages. It's wages and benefits and everything that goes along with it. Most of those positions are filled. So those are going to be costs that we're going to get, whether we like it or not. And, it's going to happen. So we're already starting off in a little bit of a negative position without knowing what those costs are. And they're not in this budget. There's nothing for those increases for those 2 bargaining units in this budget.
Yeah, there is. There's gonna be an estimate. There's no definite, like, it's gotta be. I mean, we have to.
That there are some funds, but not knowing how that will play out and what the insurance rates will do and benefits will be, it's going to be an added cost.
So those are all costs that are in this that are unknown, somewhat in our control, but limited. But to me, the ongoing deficit that we're seeing is going to come back to haunt us. And I hate to see us wipe out these fund balances that we have I can understand from Jake's position why the reserve is a good idea. I'm just really struggling with where it's gonna leave us, not this year, but in 25 and 26. I think that it's going to be an absolute disaster by then. And I think that, we keep talking about how do we move the city forward? Well, one of the things that will bring people to Lewiston, one of the things that will make us a better city is a strong school system. And if we continue to hack away at this like we've been doing for the last 25 years, it will come back to haunt us. I mean, we're already talking about the parents and potentially in some cases, the grandparents of kids that went through the Lewiston public school system as we started all of this, not fully funding the schools. And it's discouraging. It really is. I mean, I take pride in the service to the community, and I think we all take pride in saying that we're from Lewiston, but we sure don't get a lot of credit for it out there in the big world, partly because of some of this stuff like this. And it's really discouraging from my perspective, but that's all I'm going to say.
Any other discussion on the motion? All in favor? Opposed? 7-2. Right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yes, thank you. Before we move on, I have one question. There was some community conversation this weekend about the Montello playground, and there was a city councilor that suggested that not be funded. I just wanted to make sure that that's in the budget to repair the playground at Montello.
So we have some things in the budget for improvements at Montello that are existing, and that work's already the work itself is not underway, but the process to improve some things is underway. There's also some funds in LCIP for exterior improvements, and in part of that package was to do some more work out there. So I know that LCIP bonding dollars don't get approved until June, I believe. It's one of the items that has been brought up in public session as something that maybe we shouldn't do that right now. So my answer is split. So in part, yes, we have some funds now to improve the exterior at Montello. But the remaining funds were to also do exterior, not just playground, but exterior facade that's dry rotted and falling down, things like that we need to improve. So it's going to be something that we support pretty heavily. Montello as a facility is used heavily, especially in the evenings for our youth programs, and lots of kids that are younger spill over into those basketball courts and swings and that play area on both sides of the school. The way in which it gets used for our youth, it's an easy one, at least for me, to back and stand for. I do think those are improvements that are some underway, and hopefully with funding support, more to come.
Not counting like renovations and upgrades, is Montello our oldest elementary school? Or has it gone the longest without any like major significant overhaul?
Yeah, I think it has to be, because before it would have been Martell, and I mean, Longley has some age, but we've repurposed that. So
Thank you. Oh, sorry, Member Scott.
I just wanted to add to that I did bring that up with the superintendent this afternoon. We met this afternoon earlier, and I brought that up specifically about the LCIP. And I told the city council last week that before any decisions were made on that LCIP, that a facilities meeting needed to be had with the school committee. And I did mention that to Bill today to set up that meeting so that we can have that discussion. And I did myself, as I said on that social media post, go there this morning, take pictures myself. And I spoke to Jake about that as well. And I will be advocating for a conversation on that if that is brought up on the city council level, because I fully agree that needs to be replaced and fixed. It is dangerous. So
I just want to add too, so anything LCIP from a funding mechanism, those are bonded projects. And while they need city council approval, if you recall in our budget, we have the debt service for the different projects we've done. So anything that we do with LCIP, it's money we bond that's borrowed, that we pay the debt service, by we, I mean taxpayers, of course, but within the budget, it's debt service that the school committee appropriates for. So I'm not sure what reduction in LCIP projects from a city standpoint, unless it's a debt ratio component for credit rating or something like that, it doesn't land on the city exclusively from a debt perspective. Those LCIP funds are a debt service that the school committee takes on in their budget process.
All right, agenda item number 11 is to review and potentially vote on the second reading for policies ACR, ACAD, AD, JFABD, and JFABDR.
So the policy subcommittee has been busy. And we haven't reviewed policy, or we haven't had policies on the agenda for a bit, so bear with me. All of the policies under the second read are policies that you have seen for the first read. There were no changes that needed to be made. I will note the two JFABD and JFABD were policies around our homeless students, and Member Beauplant and I did have a conversation about the questions he had around those policies, which was a reason for holding off on moving that forward until we had the conversation. So other than those two, which we did have the conversation about, the other three, there's no change from the first reading.
Member Ferd.
Thank you. I'd like to make a motion to approve the second read of ACR, ACAD, AD, JFABD, JFABDR.
Member Beauplant,
Second that motion.
any further discussion? All in favor? It's unanimous. Agenda item 12 is to review and potentially vote on the first read of ACAAR, GBEBB, JCSAE, JCSB, JDF, EBAA, EBCA, EBCC, EBCF, EBBA, GBGAB.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Just a brief personal note, because of my knee not being where it should be, I have to wear a brace 3 hours a day and I'm immobile in an uncomfortable position. What a great time to read policy. And I would like to say that much of the policy is not verbiage, but words, pronouns that need to be changed, condensing things. So, you know, I've found nothing wrong with, and much of it is in the original form as well. So I have not found anything that I personally disagree with this. Now, if we want to go through these one by one, that's your business, but I support the changes that Karen and the policy subcommittee have gone over. Thank you.
Did you have more to review first, Karen, or no?
I will go over what you want me to go over, but if people are comfortable with the going for the first read, then I will not go through them.
Member Bowden.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the first read of the following policies. ACAAR, GBEBB, GCSA-E, GCSB, GDF, EBAA, EBCA, EBCC, EBCF, ECBA, GBGAB.
I will second that.
Do you want to specify what you're seconding?
Ditto, Janet.
Any further discussion? Member Scott.
You could do A through K, but
Great. I would just like to add that I concur with Member Beauplant. I took the time to read through all of this. I am very comfortable with moving forward in this way. And I appreciate all the work that the policy committee is doing, because this is a lot, and thank you.
I think generally if there's anything like significant and major, we set it, pull it aside and talk about it individually, but most of these are just updates. Any further discussion? All in favor? It's unanimous. Agenda item number 13 is to review and potentially vote on the deletion of policies EBCAE, EBCBR, ECBAE2.
So I'll just say that the deletions are a result of, as Member Beauplant said, a combination of policies into one of the policies you just approved the first read for, or they're administrative procedure that no longer needs to be part of our policy manual.
Member Heard,
I'd like to make a motion to approve the deletion of the following policies A through C.
is there a second?
I'll second. I will second the motion.
Any further discussion?
I just want to specify that's on item 13, A through C.
Yes. All right, all in favor? And that is also unanimous. Agenda item number 14 is a report from school committee chair, and I do not have anything to report tonight. Number 15 is the superintendent's report.
Just coming back from the break, so not a ton of things, but we are being recognized tomorrow evening at the Central Maine Community College event over at the Hilton, and we are being recognized for our community collaboration efforts, which I think land largely in the co-op programs, like we were mentioning before with LRTC, working with the community college and pathways for students, and also for our educator pathway work with folks taking classes over there and building that framework for the apprenticeship and working with or through adult education to become a registered apprenticeship site for educators. So a lot of good work has happened, and we'll be over there tomorrow afternoon for those of us who are able to attend. So that's a good positive.
Thank you. Report from city council rep.
Thank you. I'll just reiterate that we do have 2 meetings this week, which are workshops on the budget as necessary. We did have one last Thursday, and we had a regular city council meeting on Tuesday, the 18th. We had a great presentation from the Lewiston Senior Advisory Committee regarding an age-friendly communities program. And I'm very excited to see that move forward because, like the Youth Advisory Council, the Senior Advisory Council is doing the same thing for their age group. And it's really a good thing to see in our community. We also recognized last week Spirit of America Award, and that went to the store next door, which was a wonderful presentation. So I'm really proud of them, and I'm glad that we were able to get that award for them. We had many things about our land use and code stuff. We had a presentation about Martell School being for senior housing, and we will be getting more information on that, but the city council did agree to move forward with that, and we'll see where we go with that. And that was about it. We had some CDBG stuff, and we did approve new members for the Lewiston Auburn Railroad Company Board of Directors, Representative Kristen Cloutier and David Chittum to be on that board. So thank you.
Thank you. Agenda item number 17 is the report from the student rep who just had to leave because it's getting very late on a school night. Is it possible for us to move that like earlier in the agenda? I know it kind of throws off the flow of things, but at least the students, when they're here, could share something before they leave. Might be worth discussion.
Or shorter meetings.
Right, that would help too, but I don't know if that's going to happen. But yeah, if we could move it to around like public comment, right after public comment maybe, or something like that. And then if they have to leave early, then they can at least still share something.
Yeah, I don't know any reason why we wouldn't be able to.
Member Scott?
We do it for the Youth Advisory Council member when they come to the city council. It's almost directly at the beginning of the agenda. So I think it's absolutely should be done. Yeah.
Yeah, she just sat here for 3 hours on a school night when she probably has homework, so that would probably be better to move it up. Number 18 is updates from school committee subcommittees. Member Bopalant?
Sue, I'm sorry, I don't have my date book with me. Could you tell me the date for the next math committee meeting? I'm sorry. Give my apologies.
It's Monday, May 8th.
Member Bowden?
Thank you. Let's call me Bo Plot. That's okay. We did have a finance committee meeting today, and we were able to see the finalized audit. And I don't know how much I'm supposed to speak on that, but everything looks good. I was happy with it. Member Scott and I were able to bring that home with us. So we're gonna really go through it and take a better look at it, but everything seems pretty good. And I know Superintendent Langlois is going to share that with everyone in an upcoming meeting.
Member Damon?
We have started negotiations with the tech folks. And that's going quite nicely. And we are just going to start, I think, Bill, is it Wednesday that we're starting with general government? Yeah, so we're just getting started with general government. That is a larger group, obviously, than the tech group. So both of those are underway, will be underway. And as far as facilities is concerned, we're still working around these grants and several other projects that are proposed, but facilities is continuing to meet, although we don't have an awful lot of things settled just yet, so it's not a lot to report.
Member Eames?
Just a quick update on the policy committee. We still are plodding through. As you can see, we can sometimes go through very many items in one cycle, and sometimes it's slower because it's more substantive, but we're continuing to go. Thank you.
It just occurred to me the other day that I never give updates for my role on the Lewiston Area Public Health Committee, and I represent Lewiston Public Schools on that. Our last two meetings, their most recent one, we had a Bates College student who did a presentation. She did her thesis and gave us a presentation on lead paint in our community, and specifically lead in numbers in our schools. And that was very interesting. I'm looking now at the email though, and it says that it's the intellectual property of the student in Bates College. So I guess I won't share any more of that. And in the meeting prior to that, we had a presentation from Healthy Androscoggin on the student surveys. I'm blanking on, say it again. Yes, the MIHAS surveys that go out to students and produce results. I know you had mentioned it at one of the last meetings. And I think that that would be something, if this kind of jumps to future agenda items, but Corey at Healthy Androscoggin said that she would be happy to give us a presentation on that. And I think that would be really helpful for us as committee members to see the numbers that come out of our schools. And that's all I have. Agenda item number 19 is school committee community announcements. Member Bowden?
Thank you. So the LRTC Skills National Competitors, it sounds like we'll be here in another week or so to talk to us, and more than likely ask for some money to go to nationals. And so in an effort to decrease the amount they're asking for, there is a GoFundMe out right now. If you go to GoFundMe.com and you type in LRTC as a search, it comes right up. You can also go on their LRTC Twitter page. It's LRTC, the number 4, and then ME. And what they're hoping for is to reach $2,500 by Friday. And they're doing a little bit of a giveaway. They're going to give away to one of our students if we hit that number. We're currently at $1,510 that we've raised on our GoFundMe. So we're looking for another $990 by Friday. And so if anyone is able and willing and wants to help these kids out, it would be so appreciative. And I also wanted to ask if the superintendent would mind sharing the GoFundMe on the LPS page, just to kind of put it out there in another platform and get the word out. That was all.
You have it on your Facebook.
I do.
Member
Yes.
Scott?
Thank you. I just want to remind everybody that the Lewiston Youth Advisory Council will be doing their Let Diversity Shine, celebrating those who call Lewiston home on May 11th at the new LA Arts facility. There's going to be, this is a free event that will be held from 6 to 8, and they will be recognizing, there'll be interactive booths that include the French, the Irish, the Hungarians, the Sudanese, the Somali, the Ivory Coast, Gabonese. I mean, we've got folks from all over the place. They're doing a red carpet event where they're going to recognize all the different communities. They've got a bunch of books available. The Lewiston Youth Advisory members themselves have provided historic facts for the largest 5 waves of immigration to the community, which is Irish, French, Greek, Lithuanian, and Somali. And somebody asked me, well, what about the Italians? There was a large group of Italians that moved to the community as well, but the group shows the 5 largest immigrant groups that came in at different timeframes throughout the city's history. And they will be doing an international basket that features not only ethnic cookbooks from all of these different countries, but also gift cards to several, and I mean several restaurants in the community that include all of these different ethnic foods. So I'm super excited for this. This is on May 11th. And I don't know what day that is. I don't have my calendar in front
It's
of
a
me.
Wednesday.
It's a Wednesday, and it's from 6 to 8 at LA Arts on Lisbon Street. Yep.
Member Whitlow.
You said it was red carpet. So if you attend this, you have to like dress up?
Well, it would be nice to dress up, but no, the red carpet is actually specific to those that are presenting. So each particular group that is going to be presenting, they are going to, like, there could be somebody dancing a dance from, the Ivory Coast, and that's their cultural heritage, or it could be somebody presenting their initial outfit from Ireland or whatever it is, or food or something like that. The red carpet is going to be specific so that people can see through. I don't know if you've been to LA Arts, but it's very long and narrow. And so I guess they're going to have it in the middle so that those that are going to be there can, and people will be around to watch.
Like a runway?
Kind of like a runway. Yeah.
And it's a Thursday. I was wrong when I said Wednesday.
Yeah.
Yes. Member Bowden.
Thank you. Just one more thing. I just wanted to announce that tomorrow night are the NHS inductions, and I just wanted to send out a giant congratulations to all of our students at Lewiston High School who are being inducted tomorrow night into NHS. Like, really big achievement for them.
Member Damon.
Just an update. I had been talking with Bill Grant, and unfortunately, our robotics team did not move forward. They evidently at the Massachusetts event, our robot was bullied and damaged to the point that it wasn't able to finally finish. And so they did not move on to the big competition, unfortunately. Just they really gave it a run. And this is probably, this is one of many things that they're going to do. And I just wish them the best of luck going forward, and congratulations on how far they got. It sounds as though they just got slammed and just were not able to continue. So anyway.
Member Beaupont.
Janet, could you give the location and the time for the NHS induction tomorrow?
Yeah, I don't know that it's open to the public, but I know family members are obviously invited.
Okay.
It's tomorrow night in the cafeteria at Lewiston High School at 6:30.
Thank you.
I'm sure that if school committee members wanted to come attend, that's allowed. But I don't think it's like a big public event. Yes.
Any other community announcements? Great. Future agenda items. Member Hurd.
Thank you. Now that we are wrapping budget season, I would really like to get our parent subcommittee group up and running. I am fortunate enough that I have children of my friends of my children, their parents, not only our parents, but our staff that work for LPS. And a lot of the stuff that we talk about or that we're hearing about is a lot to do with parent involvement and home involvement and what we can bring to them, not only about like behaviors that we're concerned about, but also a lot of stuff that's happening on social media right now and how that pertains to our students, and maybe parents aren't aware of what's happening. And I just feel like it's a good source of information, and also how parents can be more involved in our school. So whether it comes to like PTOs or volunteer nights or whatever. So I would like to see that, like I said, now that we're done budget season, that up and running at some point here pretty soon.
Member Scott.
Thank you. Member Hurd and I were thinking alike because that's exactly what I was thinking. Now that budget season is, as we get to a close here, we need to really put our focus back on not just that, but some of the other big issues we had been talking about prior to budget season. We need to talk about the bathrooms. We need to talk about some of the other stuff. And I really hope that we can focus on that stuff.
In addition to that, I would like to have start working on planning some public forums, and it may like tie into the parents group, but some kind of public forum so that we can hear feedback from parents about what their biggest concerns are so that we know what direction to go in. Member Bowden?
Thank you. I was hoping that we could start having some discussions. I kind of brought this up to Superintendent Langlois around how we can kind of change the crediting for gym tying in sports, athletics that the kids are doing instead of having to take gym class in high school. Like I know it's something that we can probably do at this level, kind of change our policy. So I was kind of hoping we could start having discussions around the pathways that our subcommittee has kind of started to draw out. If that makes sense.
Member Hurd?
Thank you. So also too, I would like to see if there's a possibility, because a couple of the things that I'm hearing to meet with our local delegation is, I know we have some pretty hard stuff at the state level about what we can do when it comes to elementary students, and about how, whether it's a 3-day suspension, 5-day suspension, we are not allowed to expel elementary students, but I'm hearing from a lot of parents and staff that some of our elementary students there are fights, they're getting physical. And I know that we're at a point where we're not allowed to expel unless it's like a weapon or a threat or something like that. But if we have students at an elementary level who are continuing to get into fights over and over and over, I feel like that is a threat, not only to themselves, but to the other students in the school. So how can we, maybe there's some like different pathways to like go around that, or have some like, not necessarily like a loophole, but an exception to the rule. And how do we talk about that at a state level? And is that a conversation that we can have at the state level? Because I think that it's something that's happening quite a bit, unfortunately, in our elementary schools. And I think maybe this parent involvement group can help some with that. But how do we kind of navigate that whole situation?
Anyone else? All right. Next is to enter into executive session to conduct student A disciplinary hearing, Title 20A 10019 and Title 4056B. Is there a
So
motion?